Are we on? I think we're on. Hello, viewers of YouTube of Aligning Light Astrology. Welcome to another virtual astrology club. This one's going to be for July. If you are unfamiliar with me, I actually, viewers of YouTube. Sorry. I got to turn that off. I'm still figuring out the technology of this. So what I'm doing is live streaming astrology for the month ahead. And there is a bit of a delay, but know that there is a live chat box and you are totally welcome to use it. I'm going to be checking in periodically, at least every 10 minutes or so. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. If you have an astrology question, if I'm going through the transits and we missed something that you wanted to talk about, I may have forgotten it. So remind me, if there's a transit that you wanted to go over that, by the end, we don't. I always take time at the end of this too, just to check in, make sure we didn't miss anything. So that's why we do this live. It's so we have that opportunity to kind of connect. We have that opportunity. If you do have questions, you can ask me because I'm here right now. Live. So welcome. Okay, so you should be able to see just me as a little bubble, but mostly the chart. And this is pretty much the clock right here. Let's get that off. But what we're going to do, I'm going to first run down with a bunch of dates for the month ahead. So we start off the month with basically Mercury. And I do like to talk a lot about planets kind of going in and out of visibility in the actual real sky. And the month actually starts off in July with Mercury disappearing from view underneath the beams of the sun. So that's on the 3rd of July. I'll be going over all of these in more detail. Then we've got Mars into Taurus on the 5th. We've got Mercury into Cancer on the 5th. We have, let's see here, Capricorn full moon on the 13th, the Mercury Cazimi. I'll explain what that means on the 16th of July. Venus then joins Mercury in Cancer on the 17th. We've got Mercury in Leo on the 19th. And then we've got Sun into Leo, meow, 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 on the 22nd. We've got Leo new moon on the 28th, Mercury emerging. The month starts with Mercury kind of disappearing. By the end of the month, Mercury's back. So again, I'm going to go through all of that in detail. But before I go any further, uno momento, I'm going to just check on this chat and see if there's anyone who's around. Not yet. That's okay. All right. So overall thoughts for the month. I do have a few things that I personally, just as an astrology nerd, am super interested in that are more toward the end of July. What is very interesting, though, is that, Mars spends most of the month moving into a square by degree with Saturn. These Saturn-Mars square kind of frustrating energies between the Aquarius parts of our chart and the Taurus parts of our chart. Really, it's not new energy. It's not, these are things we've experienced before, definitely over the last several years. So none of this is new per se. But along with the square, we can have tension, we can have friction, we can also get some stuff done. So I was kind of thinking that like the earlier part of July, there is a bit of sky weather that just makes me feel like things could move along a little bit more productively. There's great energy coming from Mars to Mercury via a sextile, and that's especially for the first week of the month. One of my favorite things about this month is we have a couple planets that are, they're moving along in the sky together, kind of in their little configuration, and they're really moving at the same time, switching signs this month. So we see that with Mars and Mercury. They're moving from diurnal signs to quieter, diurnal signs are more expressive, they're louder, they're kind of more externalized, and they're going to be moving over the course of the month into quieter, more receptive places. So that's going to be really interesting to observe. I'll dig into that. I love the moon in Libra this month. For those of you who are into electing, for those of you who do watch the moon and kind of watch it change zodiac signs every 2.5 days, if you want to, that's your number to watch out for. Every 2.5 days, the moon changes signs. And this month in particular, when the moon is in Libra, which is going to be the 6th and the 7th of July, I really, really like that as well. So for reasons I will get into, but seems like a couple nice days there. And then that Leo new moon, that was kind of the last one that I was really, really, really excited about, just because it's getting a trine from Jupiter. And Jupiter is a planet that brings abundance. It brings expansion, understanding. And with a new moon, we're usually already wanting to set intentions. The kind of stereotypical internet witch thing is like, set intentions for abundance. Well, hey, your chance is finally here. I think this might actually be the stereotypical new moon to intent upon good old fashioned abundance. So that's at the very end of the month. So that's kind of my overview. We haven't had a lot of water like in the sky right now. We have the sun in Cancer. I can tell, but that's the first water we've really had. It's been for the last month, a lot of fire, a lot of air, which is a lot of action and a lot of ideas. It's a lot of busyness and activity. It's not necessarily good bedside manner, though. It's not like this connective kind of feeling where, there's good rapport amongst people. It's more like, fire and air together. They don't necessarily give a shit, how you feel, what you think, what you need. But now with the sun in Cancer, we've got a little bit more water coming back. We've got a little bit more just connectivity with other people, a little bit more consideration. You wouldn't know it by looking at the news, but we'll get to that too. But I do like to see more water. And as this month goes along, we're going to have more and more planets moving into Cancer, more and more water. By the end of July, we're back into fire territory. So I think part of July is like, there is going to be some water stuff happening. There's going to be some insights to feelings. There's going to be all that stuff. But then I think by the end of July, we're going to be back ready into like moving activity type of stuff. We're going to be ready to act after kind of sitting, I guess, in our feelings for a little bit. Some of that stereotype stuff about Cancer is true, that there might be some feelings there. I don't know. Something tells me. ASMR. Are you getting the ASMR? I've got my tea that I purposely tried not to oversteep. I always oversteep my tea, and then the tannins come to bite me in the ass later. Tannins are not our friend when we're trying to talk. Okay, anyway, so we have the clock. I guess, another thing too. Okay, so aligning light astrology. I'm Claire Moon. I live in America. I live in the USA, and unfortunately, we got some bad news yesterday, as most of us know. Abortion rights have been taken away. We don't love it. We don't love to see it. Another day in the life of being in an oppressed group. But what I want to recognize is that I had a hard time. I was reading through all of my, I wrote the weather for the month ahead many, many weeks ago, and I was reviewing it today, and it was really hard not to review all of the transits and just have my mind immediately go to like the circumstances in the US. And while I know I have a following of like 5 people, I like at least one of you is not from the US. And so I want to at least honor y'all. I know there's more going on in the world. But no, like if I'm coming off as like very like hyper vigilant today and like militant and like, watch out for this, watch out for that. Just know I'm talking to like probably protesters and stuff like that. But if you don't live in America, definitely like, I'm going to try to keep it personal. I'm going to try to keep it on the individual, on the level. Okay, cool. Just wanted to put that little caveat because like I noticed I was feeling a lot of feelings about it, and I was like, it's going to be really hard to not bring that into this. Let's be real. Okay. So like the first thing I wanted to mention too is just that before July even starts, and it's right at the end. It's right when June is turning into July. We've got Mercury here squaring Neptune. And if you know me, if you've been following Claire Moon for a while, you know that anytime Neptune is interacting by hard aspect, so a square, an opposition, probably a conjunction with Neptune, I basically employ Mercury retrograde protocols, which is basically, not overscheduling yourself. Anything logistical, anything organizational, it gets to be a little bit more difficult when Neptune is involved. Doesn't mean Neptune's a bad person. It just means when it comes to the material plane, the places of currency and taxes and forms and material people and places and things, Neptune can kind of throw some gunk in the gears. So if you are trying to kind of either exchange yourself by means of travel, if you're trying to exchange ideas, trying to exchange information, trying to navigate anything, on the 1st of July, and even, I know it's at 23 here on the 1st of July, and it's not exact until the following day, but heck, even like the last day of June, the last couple of days of June, we're going to be going into this Mercury Neptune square. And again, if you're organizing, if you're doing anything like that, what we do is we just got to double check everything, double check that you didn't have a bunch of crazy typos, double check that things are honest, true, timely. Neptune is not about certainty. Neptune is not about facts. Neptune is about spirit. It is about that. It's about inspired stuff. It is about the immaterial plane. It is also about inclusion, forgiveness, surrender. So we could have a more like constructive way that this Mercury Neptune square could come out would be more along the lines of inspired speech, inspired planning, inspired ideas. But it's a square. And squares, as we know, can be a bit tense. They can be a bit frictive. They require us to adjust and to put in a little bit more effort to work with what is there. And so I don't think it's going to be like an easy combination. I think right now in America, a lot of our inspired speech is currently pretty frazzled. I think most of us are having, you wouldn't know it by being on Twitter, but most of us are having a hard time forming coherent ideas about this and to communicate them in a way that's actually going to be received well. That's a whole process, and it's much more difficult when Mercury is at hard aspect to Neptune. That's my little pre-July into July thing. I just wanted to let everybody know about that. Uno momento. So I hope everybody's taking care of themselves. Oh, hi, Kyra. Welcome. Yeah, and that's going to be so nice for you, Kyra. So for those of you out there, if you mess with me and you mess with me enough, I'll know your chart in my brain after a while. So I know Kyra's chart. They're in the chat, but Moon in Libra, yeah, that'll be nice for you this month then. Moon in Libra is not going to be as bothered by Mars later on. It gets to interact with Jupiter in an environment that isn't as spicy. So I like it, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions, let me know, of course. Of course. So on to July proper. The month starts out with Mars-Pluto square. We already mentioned the Mercury-Neptune stuff. That's still going on as we enter into the month. But now we're also going to be looking at what's going on between Mars here in Aries and Pluto. They're going to be having a square themselves. And this is what I was mentioning in that kind of rundown I went over to begin with. The month starts off with what is not necessarily the most internally comfortable weather. It is that of power struggle, of conflict between Pluto and Mars. It is trying to, act in a way that in this case seems to want to usurp authority. It seems to want to go against the powers that be to do our own thing. But it can be confrontational. It can be very confrontational. However, with Mars being vitality, with Mars being our energy, our effort, our action, and in its power in Aries, it has Jupiter as a cheerleader here at 7 degrees. Jupiter is being like, yeah, Mars, you can do it. You are correct. It's like self-righteousness in a bottle. It's amazing. But Pluto adds power. It's just putting, it's just upping the amplitude of that, what is already there as a very powerful burst of energy. So as we come into July, just on a smaller scale, if you've got stuff you need to get done, it's a good day to do that. So, look at the place in your chart. That's something I also wanted to kind of mention at the beginning of this that I didn't mention last month was, like, I think the best way to approach these types of forecasts, whether it's mine, whether you're watching anybody else's, is to, if you know your chart, pull up your own chart on the Chani app or whatever app you're using, get it up there, astro.com, Astrodienst, and follow along. So, I'm going to be talking about this square between Capricorn and Aries, and you can look at your chart and see, if you're a Capricorn rising, that's between your first house and your fourth house. And so what that does is it basically tells us these are the areas of life this stuff is going to happen in. And then furthermore, if you can tell, which of your signs is in which house, you can Google things like, second house topics. If you're me, traditional significations of the second house, Google significations of the second house. And then you can say, okay, the power dynamic stuff is coming from there. The effort, energy stuff is coming from the Aries part. And you can start to put these things together in your mind. I know that it's a bit fraught. I know there's a lot of moving pieces, but that is really, in my mind, the best way to approach these and get the most out of what I'm saying. And then you can apply it to yourself. I'll try to give some examples as I go along. I'll try to give some examples. So like, for instance, let's say we were working with, we'll just do a little side note. We're just going to do a teaching for a minute. Okay. So let's say this person, we'll pretend like it's not transits. They are a Capricorn rising. This means that this transit between these two, we'll just imagine, is happening between topics of a first house and the topics of the fourth house. We know that the topics of the first house include self-concept, the mind, body, spirit. It's you. It's all you. And the fourth house deals with home, family, parents, land, real estate, origins, your private life. So we could say with this, perhaps this Mars-Pluto transit, this square at the beginning of July, you're going to have so much activity going on at home, and it might be up to you to not be a control freak about it, right? Because anything that Pluto wants to maybe have control over, it's just going to create stress for you as all of this action is trying to happen in your fourth house. So that's how we can it's like, what power struggle things are happening with the own identity, with the own self? Where am I being trying to strong arm this situation perhaps? And how are the powers that be in the fourth, whether it be maybe my real estate agent, whether it be my parents, whether it be the dwellers in my home, they want to do their own thing. And that might not work out so well. So just an example, that's how you can use this information. Anywho, sure, we'll be at 8 p.m. Actually, no, I like to have the clock at, I like to have a clock at the certain place. So I'll put it there. We're going to have Scorpio rising here for a while, but just know it's arbitrary. It is arbitrary. So moving on from that Pluto-Mars square, we know we can get a lot done, potentially in the 11th hour. Just making, and I say the 11th hour because Mars is at the very end of Aries and Pluto is at the very end of Capricorn. Granted, Pluto will be there forever, but Mars is kind of at the end of Aries, is at the end, the last few degrees, the last kind of week here where they're going to have a lot of their tools, a lot of their own ability and efficacy to get done what you want to get done. So it's a good time to do that. That's why I say 11th hour. It's like we don't have that much more time with Mars in Aries. So, get to doing it while the getting's good. Just making sure the Pisces part of the chart and the Gemini areas are working well together. We've got, wait, what did I say? Yeah, so I really like, I think a lot of us have been talking about how much we're enjoying Venus, having Venus in Gemini, having Mercury in Gemini. It's very flirtatious. It's very effervescent. It's very social. It's a lot of fun. And what I was looking at here, and I had mentioned that Neptune Mercury square situation, I saw kind of two possibilities. So when I see a transit, I kind of like to fan out options in front of me. And there's kind of two buckets of options I see for this as far as how it's going to turn out. And it could be, having a really cool artistic collaboration. Maybe you're bringing some skills together with somebody else's that, maybe on the face of it, those types of things might not go well together. Like maybe, I don't know, watercolors and knitting, they're both creative activities. I don't know how we can put watercolors and knitting together. But if you put in enough of your own elbow grease, you can make it happen. And with Pisces, Neptune here, that's visionary. It's wide perspectives. There's an ability to have that imagination, to have that ability to just like fuck around with stuff in your mind and come up with cool, new creative things. I saw a potential for that. I think the most important thing with this on the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd of July, if you are doing fun, artistic, creative, playful things with people, don't hold on to them. Neptune is it doesn't last. It's the impermanence. It is the non-physical quality of things. It is definitely not a permanent type of transit. They're both immutable signs. Mutable signs like Pisces and Gemini are constantly changing. So I think whatever interactions we have with people, whatever pleasure we're pursuing, whatever ideas we're exchanging, it's going to be on more of a short-term exchange level. So just be present with and enjoy it while it's there. The more negative side of this period of time could be, especially like if boundaries aren't really well defined, if roles aren't very well defined, sometimes that's okay. Like if we are in a container where we know it's experimental, we know we're just like, having a good time, or, it's casual, that's cool. But if you are in a situation with people and you're creating something together, or if you're creating something together, just make sure that you have like defined roles and everybody kind of understands what's going on, because there can be misunderstandings here. But I mean, overall, it just looks like a very enjoyable kind of combination of things between Gemini and Pisces on those first few days of the month. So we can be creative with whatever we're doing. The 2nd is when that Mercury Neptune square perfects. And now on the 3rd, and now this is where we get Mercury, who is close enough to the sun that if you looked up at Mercury in the sky, which at this point they're a morning star, they're part of that procession of planets in the morning sky that starts with Saturn. All of these planets are marching through the morning sky, and Mercury is going to disappear from that crowd. Now it depends on, in the text, it would say 15 degrees. That was kind of the rule, but from an astronomical point of view, depending on where you are, depending on your geography, what the smog level is, basically how well you can see the sky, Mercury is going to be, it might be a little less than 15 degrees that they're visible or not. It might be a little bit more. So it's not exactly 15, like if you're being super pedantic about it. And that's why I'm saying this, because YouTube is the most pedantic place on the planet. No, that's a lie. Reddit is the most pedantic place on the planet. But anyway, I just want to point that out. But 15 degrees is basically just the textbook kind of agreed upon consensus convention. That's the word I'm looking for. So anyway, that happens. And symbolically, what does that mean? So astronomically, I just said that all of that very visual, scientific, tangible world stuff. Symbolically, when any planet, whether it's Mercury, Venus, whoever, disappears in the sky because they're too close to the sun, that means that planet significations are dampened. They are lowered in volume. They're not as loud. They're not as easily seen physically. Now, I think we automatically want to assume that that is bad. We think visibility is good, invisibility is bad. It really depends on the situation. So I always use the example that, and now I don't have a source, but ancient folks would purposely choose these times to do, things they didn't want to be seen. Maybe if it was Venus, I would be doing a clandestine mission to get you a present. I don't know. Like maybe it's a surprise gift and I don't want you to know. But if Mercury is going to be under the beams and they're going to be in eventually, pretty quickly here in Cancer on the 5th, 2 days from here, let's just go to there. What this says to me is we're having feelings and they're not being loud. They're not being out loud. Like there's something about our thoughts. And I say feelings because it's water. I say feelings because of Cancer. Mercury more speaks to our thoughts, our judgments, our labels, all of those types of intellectual little things. They're not going to be as visible. They're going to be a little hidden and or internalized. And there's two reasons to say that. One, because Mercury is going from an external diurnal air Gemini place. Very, very apt to say what it's thinking. A nocturnal water sign like Cancer is more internal. It's quieter. It's more receptive. It's not going to be the one to necessarily go and do the thing, but it will respond in a certain way. It is internalized. So we've got that along with being under the beams. We've got two things there then that basically say it's quieter. Whatever that message is, it might be harder to get out, actually. Maybe by choice, maybe not. And that's where that kind of, it's neither good nor bad, but looking at your context, what do you want? What do you need? And how do we then respond to knowing that Mercury might not be as loud for a few weeks? So that happens on the 3rd, and that's going to be the case for most of the month. At the very end of June, Mercury is going to emerge. Actually, that'll be in Leo. Mercury will become visible again, and we'll get there when we get there. Okay, so that's the 3rd. The moon in Virgo, I like the moon in Virgo right at this point because, wait, why did I like that? Oh yeah, it's not dealing with Saturn. So, it continues to be that every time the moon is in Leo, it's going to be in an opposition to Saturn. If you're ever looking at a chart and you got to do your transit, or you got to do like your commute, your transit for the day, your commute to work, when the moon is in Leo, just please leave early. Just leave early. Like, you might run into some traffic jam stuff. I don't know. Like, I actually haven't gotten any feedback. I just can't imagine that this moon opposite this retrograde Saturn isn't bad for our daily commute. The moon used to mean, or still means, short distance travel. That's why I say that. Yeah, that's another thing too. So, if you've listened to the astrology podcast, you've heard Austin Coppock and Chris Brennan and those folks talk about last year, or 2 years ago, I guess, whenever the last ingress was of Mars from Aries into Taurus. And it was a bit rambunctious. And so I'm wondering this time as well if we're going to see, because it's about the 4th of July. And of course, we just had all this political stuff happen in the US. And so, you got to kind of wonder if the insurrection was what happened the last time this was the case, what's going to happen now. What takes me from threat level red to threat level yellow or orange on this is that the moon is in Virgo, and it's not technically interacting by sign with Mars while it's in Aries or with Saturn. So the more, the moon is our filter. Allegedly, all of the effluences of the planets are kind of filtered through the moon, and the moon itself is filtered through whatever sign it's in. So if that filter is coming, all that stuff is being filtered through the moon in Virgo, it's more practical. It's drier. It's not as emotionally charged. It is able to kind of look at the and hopefully accept the details of the matter, and hopefully act not as maybe overly emotionally. So because of that, I'm a little less concerned about this. That being said, last few degrees of Aries on the 4th of July, I'm probably just gonna not do anything. I'm probably just gonna not celebrate it and stay in. I don't know. Maybe I'll get some hate mail about that. I'm not sure. But yeah, even just with the astrology, I'm just like, this doesn't look like any, I don't want to be out and about. Unless we're raising hell, I guess. But see, that's what we're concerned about. So be careful. I guess that's the thing too. And then once Mars does get into Taurus, it's a pace change. It's a halting. It's a slow down. And so just be careful, and just be expecting that on the 5th, when we get Mars going into Taurus, things are slowing down. Mars is not able to do his actions as quickly, easily as it would like. So just be aware of that with whatever you're doing. So, yeah, 1:04 Central Daylight Time. So 1:04 a.m. on the 5th, that's exactly when Mars moves into Taurus, and that's Central Time. And the interesting thing about that too is that Mars is going to be rising at that moment. So, anytime anything is rising, it just really puts an exclamation point on the significations of that planet. And if Mars is action, doing the thing, it is also, severing, separation. It is conflict, and it's just kind of our effort, whatever we're putting that effort toward, it's effort. And with a big exclamation point on that, it could be a time to really, whatever it is in your personal life, whatever's going on, to put a push of effort towards something too on the 5th. So it could be really good for that. If you've been struggling to kind of get something started, if you've been struggling with that, I think on the 4th, that's going to be a good time to get that last chance of that Aries kind of martial starting energy. Mercury goes into Cancer not too long after that, and really starts separating from that sextile immediately. So I've been really enjoying this energy. Mars sextiling Mercury, like basically sending constructive effort type of energy to Mercury and Gemini. I've been getting a ton of writing done. I've been getting a ton of communicating done. That stuff, I've just felt more motivated, less resistant to it. So hopefully that's been you too. We're still getting that same energy. We still have that sextile. So we're not losing that, but being it is going into these nocturnal signs of earth and water instead of fire and air, what we're going to see is an internalization of that. So now maybe it's less, me writing to share with other people. And maybe now I'm going to be writing more in my journal, maybe, instead of writing about or planning all of the things I'm going to do or doing all of the cognitive labor that I need to do to get things done. Maybe now I'm putting more of that energy, which is much slower paced, into my inner world, into my emotional state, or just into the things, the efforts that are quieter, that aren't as loud and external, that are more private. Just some things to think about, but it is constructive. Yeah, just the slowness. I think that's kind of going to be the biggest shift, is just the pacing. And that's going to be frustrating for Mars. I mean, as we know, Mars is in detriment here. Its domicile is Scorpio. It's as far away from home as it's possibly going to get. So Mars and Scorpio, if we want to move fast, if we want to do the thing, now in Taurus, we have to do all of these like consistent, boring, mundane steps. We got to wait to watch things grow. These are not things that Mars is too keen on. But that being said, once Mars does get going in Taurus, it's like a juggernaut. It just keeps going. So if we can, I kind of wonder, and I'm going to keep bringing it up, with the political climate in America and all of the movements that are inevitably starting to gain steam, I think just knowing that it might be kind of slow. It might be kind of a slog. What's interesting is that, I just heard in Madison, Wisconsin, there was a pretty sparse, I'm part of the problem. I wasn't there. I'm in Illinois right now. But I used to live in Madison, Wisconsin, which is usually like a very political city. Like they're constantly protesting. I've protested there for freeing the nipple. It's not a secret. We have them. But there really weren't that as many people, at that as there could have been probably yesterday at the Capitol. But I kind of wonder too, I think it's going to be slow. But what I'm hoping is that with just the consistent ability of Mars to just keep moving forward, just one step in front of the other with Taurus, that can be what we're doing for at least the next, 6 weeks. And then once Mars gets into Gemini in August, then the action is really going to start going. Right. So if we can all just remember it's going to be so hard to be patient, but I think we might have to be for several weeks before August, because Mars is action. Mars is the doing. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Still sextiling them for a few more days. So the 4th, the 5th, 6th or 7th, and then that energy will start to wane. We'll not have it as much of that oomph in our Mercury stuff. Mercury's going into Cancer, into a very compassionate sign too. That's kind of an interesting change. Of course, we're sad to lose out on Mercury being in their domicile of Gemini, making all of those mercurial communication exchange type things easier. In Cancer, Mercury doesn't have all of its favorite tools to do all of its communicating, thinking, judging, learning. But we can use those tools for Cancerian things. So that is knowing what we need to grow, knowing what we care about enough that we'd like to grow it, whether that be a plant or a project. Like it could be literally any kind of project you care about. In Cancer, we want to grow it. We want to nurture it. We want to protect it. And as, Mercury keeps, this Mars Mercury stuff, it also makes me wonder about protection and that capacity, using Mars as a defense, especially in a Venusian place. Usually we think of Mars in Aries as being the conflict, the direct offense. We are going forth and we are throwing the spear and we're doing that thing. But in Taurus, Venus is the one who's in charge now. Venus is the one who's directing Mars. And so now we're Marsing in the name of people, of values, of things, of connection, of caring about others. Maybe Mars doesn't love it, but this is the job that they have. So we can put it more towards defense, more towards protection. And I also like it for that reason, this kind of thing. I know, Mars doesn't really want to have much to do with Cancer, but I do think that there's still that kind of protective, defensive element that could be helpful for people at this time in the first week of July. On the 6th, we got Moon opposite Jupiter. So this is why I had mentioned I like that Moon in Libra. We finally get to interact with Jupiter across the pond without Mars being involved. So Jupiter is very much still fiery. It is righteous. It knows why it wants to do what it wants to do. It has, truth and knowledge and justice at the forefront of its mind. Very enthusiastic, incredibly, almost too enthusiastic. And all of that kind of energy is trying to be balanced on the 6th and the 7th with a moon trying to kind of keep the peace in Libra. So it's like, these are, there's a square too with Mercury. And what this felt like to me was a good couple days to think about, how do we actually communicate what we want to communicate with people in a way where it's actually received? Because I think, especially with Mars having been in Aries for so long, Mars and Jupiter in Aries was just like this very boisterous, enthusiastic, spirited kind of energy. But it's not always kind. It's not always timely. It can be pretty gruff. And so the chances of you actually having your message of peace, your message of Jupiter, your message of what is fair and just in the spirit of the law, it might not land. And it really begs the question of how important it is. If you really want to make change, how do you communicate it in a way where it's received without tone policing, without holding back too much? Because clearly that's what the Democratic Party, that's the problem, right? And it's my show. I get to say what I want. These are my thoughts only. But they're not hard enough. They're not strong enough, right? So all of these things are hard to balance. And that's the nature of the opposition. It feels like when things are in opposition, these are of the nature of Saturn, it's like a stalemate. It's an impasse. It's much more difficult to navigate, I think, than a square, because at least with the square, it feels like you can work with it more. You can just like meld it more into what you need, even if it's a lot more work. With this, it's like oil and water. And anytime you got oil and water, the only way to mix them together is by adding a fat to make it into an emulsion. So it's almost like that's where Cancer comes in. It's like we've got oil, we've got water, and the Sun and Mercury have the ability here to bring our ideas out in a way that maybe has that touch of Libran diplomacy, has that righteous power behind it, but also we can communicate it in a way that is receivable. So I know I just said a lot of the same thing in a lot of different ways, but it feels like an important time if you've got thoughts, if you've got planning to do, is also just a great, like, planning in the name of what is authentic to you, planning in the name of what you need to feel like safe, cared for in your physical body. Those types of plans, I don't know, I feel like we have our head on very straight on this day, on the 6th and the 7th of July. Yeah. And like I said, if you're not dealing with an external situation, all of this applies internally as well. So, it can be private stuff as well. So it could be as boring as planning your self-care. Mercury Jupiter square coming in on the 8th. We have also got Moon opposite Uranus. So there's enthusiasm, there's speed, there's learning, there's understanding. It's in a way that, Mercury might not appreciate being pushed so fast in Cancer. It kind of wants to take its time to sort through all of the perceiving. It's like in a water sign, the knowledge and the information and the facts, they're coming through. They're not on paper. You're not necessarily hearing them through words. It's coming through feeling, through water, through emotion, through lived experience. And it takes Mercury a little bit longer of a time in water to process all of that. Whereas it's running into this really enthusiastic, boisterous, just optimistic square from Jupiter saying, more, we want to learn more. We want to do more things. So it looked fun to me. It could be like an enthusiastic but compassionate giving of your energy, being really pumped toward care and growth, toward, having caring discussions with others if we want to bring in that Mercury component, telling someone your truth in a way that is uncomfortable, like it might be uncomfortable to tell that truth, but in Cancer, it might be received in a really caring way. As long as we come in it, kindly. Mercury is now combust on the 9th. And when a planet is within 8 degrees, I feel like I've seen 7, the medieval Renaissance things. I don't know. I feel like they're a degree off depending, but I've seen 7 or 8 degrees for combust. And it's kind of just like an extreme version of being under the beams that I mentioned before. So when a planet disappears behind the rays of the sun, it gets more hidden. It has a harder time doing its stuff too. I don't know if I mentioned that. That's within 15 degrees. Once a planet is within 8 degrees, let's just dial it up. Let's just ratchet all of that up. Now you're extra hidden. Now it's extra hard for Mercury to get its ideas out, So even though it's like Jupiter's got the truth, Jupiter wants to speak up for its autonomy, Jupiter wants to act with agency based on what it knows, Mercury might be having a hard time being seen and heard. So don't give up, wait until the end of the month. And I think you might have a better chance. Okay. That's what I'll be doing. Then on the 10th, Sun Uranus sextile. So that's fun. Anytime Uranus is involved, we can have one of two things, and we, can't predict them because it's Uranus, but it's the disrupty, interrupty type of variety that creates chaos. It's not fun. It's uncomfortable. The other variety with Uranus is happy accidents, innovation, trying new things, novelty. And it can really go both ways. So I think the most important thing is to have an attitude with Uranus that I'm not going to try to control the outcome because I can't. And whatever does happen, I'm going to try to be open to it so that I can just, adapt to it as best as possible, make the most of it. If it is crunchy, if there is a disruption in what you're trying to do, then knowing that that is a possibility. So, if in your pursuit of care, if in pursuit of your growth, you are disrupted in some way, particularly from the Taurus part of your chart, like let's say Taurus is in your 7th and maybe you're trying to go on a long distance trip in the 9th, maybe with your sibling or something like that. Maybe something having to do with your spouse, your clients, your business partner interrupts you for some reason. Could be constructive. It could be, oh, hey, you forgot to put the travel notice on your business credit card. You got to do that. or something like that. You know, you just have to be ready to rise to the occasion. And it's not necessarily bad. We don't have to necessarily worry about it. But it could be also a chance for novelty, for expressing the self in a new way, caring for the self in a new way, communicating about needs in a new way, communicating about preferences in a new way. And I say that because Taurus is our preferences, is what we value. And Cancer many times is our needs. And with Mercury there, we're talking about it, we're thinking about it, we're listening about it. So if someone is coming to you, like asking, you know, for their needs to be met, or you're asking someone for your needs to be met, might actually be, you know, I don't know if it's like a decent, it's not a stable sky to do that under, but know that if those questions just arise, if those conversations just happen to arise, it could be a moment for a breakthrough. It could be an opportunity, because I do think that Uranus does sometimes bring those opportunities. And that's kind of what a happy accident is, right? We didn't intend for it, but it's happy because it ended up being an opportunity. It ended up being something that we actually enjoyed. So, okay, I am going to check in with the chat, see what's going on there, see if we have any questions. Oh my gosh, look at all these people. Wow. Thanks for coming, everybody. Hello. Yeah, honestly, Melissa's like, I thought this was a personal chart reading for a second. I pretty much read. Yeah, this is pretty much how I read, whether you're the sky, whether you're a person, whether you're a box turtle, like it doesn't matter. We're reading it. I think I've been enjoying Mars and Aries just fine. It's hard for me not to enjoy a planet being able to plan it how it wants to plan it. There's been a lot of, I have it in my third, which is your local spaces. Your third house is your local community and neighborhood. And I've been seeing a ton of cardinals, and they're so peeping cute with their peeping little faces, and they got their little like thing. They're so darn cute. And they're just like, I love their song. I just love them. But I attribute that to Mars and Aries. It's red, right? It's in my neighborhood. It's so perfect. Mars and Libra weeps, Melissa says. Yeah, if I look at my chart with the Vedic tradition, with Jyotish astrology, they use sidereal, and I have Mars and Libra with that. And it makes a lot of sense. It really does. It's not my favorite, but you know who else has Mars and Libra? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And we all know that they're the bomb.com. Da-da. All right, great chat coming on. We got tuning in from Twin Cities Pride, Madam Dram. Wow, that's awesome. Be safe. The cities. I'm from Minnesota, so I know the cities. You're in good hands. I actually, oh my gosh, now I'm having all these memories flood back. For anyone who's a fan of the cities in Minnesota, the gay 90s I think it's in Minneapolis. I don't think maybe it's in St. Paul, but the gay 90s is a bar. It's a gay bar, clearly. And that is where I basically had like my baby gay experience, my baby queer experience. And it's also where I found pole dancing. It was the very first time. I mean, I had been to like strip clubs before, but it was the first time I had seen someone, because they had go-go dancers and they had like poles and stuff. And I saw people doing some really cool shit. And I also realized go-go dancing existed all at the gay 90s. Oh my gosh, I love that place. Literally smells like a deli. Don't get me wrong, it's not like the most immaculate place, but if you're from Minnesota and you're like a queer, we all have our gay 90s stories. Oh, I love it so much. Okay, anyway, I digress. Yeah, happy Pride. Let's have a sip of tea for that. We got to have some nice things, right? While they flip and last. Okay. Well, thanks for engaging, everybody. I love that. So the moon is opposite Venus on the 11th. And this is very nice. Now, I had made a tweet not too long ago, and now this is more into the future, but we're going to have Mars in Gemini for like 7 months, from August of this August 20th of 2022 to March of 2023. And then whenever the moon is in Sag, we're going to have the moon opposite Mars. And that's just going to be, like I said, that just sounds like a 7-part debate series ready to happen. What we have right now is the opposite. What we have right now is Venus in Gemini. This is where the debate could be somewhat open-hearted and decent and civil. We've got a lot of feelings here. We're feeling what is correct, With Sagittarius, it's like, what do I believe? What are my beliefs in Sagittarius? What's the unifying theory of things? What's my philosophy? And with the moon there, it's like I'm feeling my philosophy in my effing bones, and try to change my mind about it. They could be very, very fiery in their convictions. At the same time, we've got Venus, who's almost kind of the opposite over here in Gemini, kind of willing to listen to any idea from anyone on the street corner. Like, they don't care who you are. Venus will listen to you in Gemini and hear what you have to say. So it's going to be a juxtaposition between those two energies, between those two vibes. If we can just, keep ourselves kind of, again, like, I guess, sane, keep ourselves, I don't know, at times like these, I really start to get conflicted about violence, to be very honest. Like, is it good to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to get into all that, but just know what I'm not saying is we be one way or another. I think that's everybody's individual kind of thing. And also, like, when you get into groups, following the people who are the marginalized person and following their direction. But I'm not going to tell people how to act, but just know on the 11th of July, there's quite the juxtaposition there. There's an ability to really listen to people. There's an ability to take in new information that is interpersonal related. It's Venus, it's relationships. It's about values too, really. Like, what do we value? But Moon in Sagittarius doesn't always keep it reasonable. They don't always keep it rational. No offense. They just don't. So just, keep your head on straight. And two, what makes me think about that is, like, we've had the nodes across Taurus, Scorpio for like 6 months now, at least. Well, about 6 months. The year and a half before that, we had the nodes and eclipses happening across Sag and Gemini. And that was when everyone was arguing to high heaven about pandemic COVID stuff. So, so that's the vibe. That's the vibe. On the 12th, we get Venus trine Saturn. I don't hate this at all. It's going to be, probably from the 11th, 12th into the 13th, 14th of July. So that that second week of July, Saturn and Venus together, it's seeing relationships realistically. It's seeing values realistically. It's seeing what we enjoy, what we love, what we actually would like to pursue in terms of preference. And it's seeing it with a critical eye. So, of course, with a retrograde Saturn in Aquarius, this is a strong critical eye. I don't think we're going to have any problem having a realistic kind of critical view on this. It could almost go into, what's the word? Cynicism. And cynicism, at least in my opinion, is no better than false optimism. It's false pessimism. So, either one way or the other, but we are going to get a more of a ability to see clearly, I think, with Saturn and Aquarius. So if you're looking at your relationships, which ones make sense? Which relationships make sense for all of the systems and structures of the Aquarius part of my chart? So let's say you're a Scorpio rising, and let's say you've got an Aquarius 4th house and you've got transiting Saturn moving through your 4th house. What kinds of exchanges of, your resources with others make sense for your private life? How, you can't give to everybody all the time. Your private life is going to suffer because you're constantly not in it. Also, like, what systems of your home and of your dwelling, like, what relationships make sense that are sustainable for your home and your dwelling? Like, you got to have good boundaries. You got to have all of that stuff in place. So just like, who's coming with, who's not coming with, who is correct for this system and this ecosystem of my life? That's kind of the question that I see, and the opportunity to be like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And then to make some choices. If we look at Austin Kopic's work with the 36 seconds, they talk about, this last decan of Gemini many times being about making a choice and having to choose between several different options, maybe. And not always just choosing two, it's Gemini. So we might be choosing like 3 or 4, but we're still having to make some choices. So it's an interesting day. It's an interesting transit. And I think it's very constructive. It's a trine. So I'm not worried. The only thing I'm worried about with the 13th is over criticism or hyper criticism. Then we have Venus square Neptune. And this is kind of, I kind of, I get so annoyed when these things happen, because it's like, Saturn's trying to do the certainty thing. And this is the consequence of having all of these planets at the end. It's like any other planet that's transiting through, it's not just interacting with Saturn by, Venus isn't just interacting with Saturn by trine, it's also interacting with Neptune by square. It's not interacting with Pluto. Forget about them. But that's the thing. And Saturn is about certainty and Neptune is about uncertainty. And so it's not as simple as, oh, here's your relationships, here's your systems. Oh, what do you value? That's another thing. Venus's values. What values make sense for what you're building in your Aquarius parts of your chart? What is being restructured in Aquarius that really should align with whatever Venus's values are? And again, there might be a few of them. And it's good to look at that periodically too. I'm always harping about this, but our values change as we age. What we value romantically, what we value career-wise, what we value in our platonic relationships, all of those things change as we change. So looking into that periodically and not just assuming that, oh, because I've always valued making my own schedule for work, that I might not tolerate that now, or vice versa, values, Venus, Neptune. Now we've got some confusion, maybe we've got some delusion, just making sure that you don't, if Neptune is involved, we just want to make sure, and Saturn will help us to see clearly. Saturn will help us to be very realistic on the 13th, but not without Neptune kind of trying to throw a boomerang in there and be like, yeah, but what about this could be great. This could be fantastic. What about this? Expectations can get in the way of things. So making sure that expectations are clearly known, clearly communicated. Knowing them is half the battle, because they can creep up very sneakily, those expectations, when we're doing stuff or planning stuff, or, anytime we're futuring about stuff. And with a square, it's not, it could be a little crunchy down the line. And interestingly, isn't this where, no, I'm thinking about a different degree. But anyway, just make sure you're not being delusional about anything either. That would be the other concern. Could be fun in a spiritual, artistic, sexy kind of circumstance. Again, with, like I had mentioned before, that with the Mercury Neptune square, now we've got the Venus Neptune square. Whatever is enjoyable, whatever enjoyment we do find on that day, be present with it, like have it, yay, yay, yum, 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 yow, but like, let it go. Don't try to think, oh, this is going to be it now. This is my thing forever. Or, again, and now this, especially with other people and boundaries, Neptune fogs those boundaries. It makes them porous. So if you're cool with, like, it might be a good time for like a fantasy laden one night stand, but it's not maybe a good time to like commit to a brand new person that you just met. That's all I'm saying. Just know the weather that you're working with. You can have all the fun if you want. And it's a pivot, a square is a pivot. So if we're looking at, Neptune being surrender, being forgiveness, Neptune is open-heartedness, It's unconditional love. How is Venus able to do those things in a way that, you know, is integritous for her? Might be kind of difficult with this square, but now we have a Capricorn full moon. All right. Capricorn full moons. I mean, the moon doesn't love to be in Capricorn, right? Because it's hard for the moon in Capricorn to get its needs met. It's harder to feel physically safe. It's harder to feel emotionally safe when you have a moon in Capricorn. And I like to think of it not as like someone who, it's not the moon's problem or fault per se. It's not like if you got a moon in Capricorn, you don't know how to feelings, or you don't know how to emote, or you don't know how to get your needs met. That's not it at all. It's the fact that you might have to work harder to do it. If you think about the moon in Cancer, that's when we're in our nourishing waters. The moon loves being in Cancer. It has everything that it needs to have the conditions just right so that it can grow for whatever it's growing. In Capricorn, the conditions for growth are much more difficult. The conditions to get your needs met, you know, you got to do more stuff. You got to go through different struggles maybe to do that. So what I want everyone to do is kind of look at your Capricorn part of your chart, look at the house that holds Capricorn in this random transit clock chart. We've got it in the third house. And I would just ask myself, what's being illuminated there? Because in a full moon, we have this bright light shining in on that zodiac sign. And it's basically taking a big flashlight saying, what's in there? What's going on? A full moon is also a time of culminations. It's a time of, people talk a lot about releasing, which I don't personally resonate with it as much on it's in a vacuum, just thinking about like letting go of stuff. But what I do think about is how sometimes in the process, the 2 weeks prior to the moon making its whole journey around the zodiac to have a full moon again, what have we learned in that time? If it's an internal thing, if I'm thinking internally, what have I learned in this time, or what insights have I come upon? And they have now allowed me to maybe release this older version of myself. Or if it's an external thing, like maybe I'm making a loaf of bread, maybe I'm figuring out how to make bread. And over the last 2 weeks, I have watched all the YouTube things. I've gotten my yeast. I've made a few loaves of bread and failed. And now at the full moon, at the culmination, I've done it. I've made my bread. and what happens when you make a loaf of bread? You eat it. You have to release that, right? So that's how, I don't know if that's how people are talking about releasing at the full moon, but that's how I think of it. It's like you've done all this work and you finally got this thing to show for it, whether that be a concrete, tangible thing like a project or like a communication, like I'm, you know, presenting this tweet that I deliberated over. Very boring example. But what happens after that, you know, and that's part of the release part. If it's internal, very much could be just figuring some stuff out. At the full moon, it's like, wow, that's all like that. That's clearly like that. and then you know it. And then you can think, okay, how am I going to apply that? How am I going to apply that for the rest of the 2 weeks of that lunation? So if it's the bread example, who am I going to share that bread with? Who am I going to share my knowledge of baking with now? You know, maybe this is what the full moon was. Maybe you're sharing like, not only here's the bread, but here's how I did it. And by the time, you know, the moon is 3/4 waning quarter, you're sharing that information with people. And if it's an internal example, maybe we've had our emotional insight, all of that good stuff. Maybe by the 2 weeks after the full moon, we're applying it. You know, maybe I figured out this, and this is a real example. Just the other month, I figured out this really cool way of conflict, of navigating conflict with others, of having those difficult conversations with people. And now that I know how to do it, I actually have to apply it. And I didn't want to. It's like, now that you know better, you have to do better. I can't just like, now that I know how to navigate things in this new way, I can't imagine going back and just like, you know, plowing through things maybe the way I did before. But at the same time, I still really want to. So it's like in this example now, in these next 2 weeks, how am I going to apply and actually live out the bread, live out the insight? and then we'll do it all over again at the next new moon. So look at your Capricorn area. What is going on in there and what's culminating? What's really coming to fruition? What do we see that's really come out of the last couple weeks, the first half of July? And Pluto is here. So this really, I mean, if we wanted to get psychological, now we can get pretty psychological. We can literally just talk about like releasing things we're clinging to. Anytime we've got Cancer and Capricorn being the situation, immediately I'm thinking about sustainability in our lives, just in the structures of our lives. If Capricorn is very much these, Capricorn is like the thing that you build, it like becomes its own monster almost, and it starts to control you. That can be Capricorn. It's the kind of the startup company in Cancer, the really close, like 4-person startup company in Cancer, and then it grows and grows, and then pretty soon it's completely out of effing hand by the time we're in Capricorn, and then it just gets unsustainable and it's not healthy. Like you can't, no one can physically keep up some of these processes and systems. With Pluto going through Capricorn, total side note, by the way, Pluto entered Capricorn in 2808. It's leaving next year. During this time, it's just like, what I saw is a bunch of, now I'm going to sound real judgy, but I'm trying not to. The families that got like 3 cars, a mortgage on a house they don't need, they've got like, they're working 60, 70 hours a week. Everyone in their family is overextended. It's like, that's Capricorn. The systems and structures have gotten so just like overbearing that they're no longer sustainable or conducive to life. And then you start to see shrewd businessmen, shrewd business people. So making sure that there's none of those themes happening in your life, and finding ways to delegate, finding ways to scale back so that we can balance the Cancerian need to take care of our mortal squishy forms, while being able to pursue whatever we might aspire toward. You know, I think if Sagittarius is very much our aspirations, and that's Jupiterian ruled, it's what we hope for. It's what we quest after. And once we're questing after something and we find the place with Capricorn and we actually start building that thing that we were kind of questing after, it gets to a place where we got to make it sustainable or we got to kill it, one or the two. So that's a theme. That's a theme. Don't think I have anything else to add. I mean, Saturn cannot see the moon, it's an inversion by traditional aspect. So we don't get any kind of extra Saturnian guidance to this one. And Uranus is in a constructive relationship. So I think if there is any kind of difficulty balancing the Cancer and Capricorn themes of care and advancement, you know, keeping things sustainable in a way where I can still take care of myself, but I can also keep progressing. I think we could get some cool ideas from Uranus and Taurus, from the Taurus part of the chart, saying, hey, what things are changing over here that might allow for this sustainable balance to be achieved? Or what things could we change in Taurus that would make this sustainability easier to achieve? Those would be kind of the questions I would be asking at that Capricorn full moon on the 13th of July. And I always like to look too with a lunation at the next aspect. This is something I learned from Demetra George, looking at the moons. If it's a new moon, its next aspect after it breaks away from the sun, or its next aspect after it breaks away from the opposition with the sun. And in this case, the next traditional aspect that the moon is going to make is toward Mars. And that also points us to this area, this Taurus area of the chart that holds Uranus. So something keeps pointing me back to there, that there's change in action in the Taurus parts of our charts. So honestly, like some of the most consistent stuff, some of the most predictable stuff that does not want to change at all, that's where the changes kind of need to be made that could be helping with this problem of balance and sustainability between Cancer and Capricorn. So it keeps pointing me there. What's interesting though is before that, if we want to go by non-traditional planets, if we want to look at Neptune and Pluto, because the moon is going to hit those first. The moon is going to hit a sextile with Neptune first right after this full moon. And then it's going to hit a conjunction bodily with Pluto. And what that tells me is that, maybe something on the way to making these changes has to do with Neptunian surrender, Neptunian acceptance. Maybe something to make those changes has to do with what is kind of controlling me in this area of my life. What am I not wanting to let go of with Pluto as well? It's like very much all of that psychology kind of stuff coming in with that, I feel like. This is constructive, but it's not fun. And I think that's my final notes. Sorry. Mercury, Uranus, sextile, that too. So this is just another thing that's kind of adding to that. I guess maybe this is the last thing, is that this is also just speaking to that involvement of what change, what disruption is happening here. And how does that change our plans? And, how does this change? Maybe these changes allow us to communicate some of these needs a little bit more directly. So I think that's it. On the 15th, the moon is going to meet Saturn. And so, it's kind of interesting here. It's like Venus just had this trine with Saturn. And if you weren't sure then, like if you weren't sure on like the 12th, 13th, what that very serious relational Venus Saturn trine was about, I bet on the 15th, you're going to figure it out because the moon is going to be with Saturn here and still trining to Venus, at least by sign. She's separating now. But this is just an echo. This feels like an echo because the moon is going to carry that light kind of as it's almost like Venus heard Saturn. It's like Venus is like, I get it, Saturn. I realize this is the issue. I realize these are the limitations. I know that I need to have these boundaries or blah, blah, blah. But by the 15th, it's like the moon it's an echo. It's Saturn being like, yeah, did you hear me though? Because it doesn't look like you're doing it. So again, if you're not sure earlier in that second week of July, what's going on with your relationships, wait till the moon gets on Saturn. And I think it's going to be pretty clear. All right, let's check in with the chat. Oh, Pavlina, I was like, I hope somebody's a Scorpio rising. Then this is like very you. We can always pretend. Oh, someone's got a moon Venus opposition that moon across Sag and Gemini on their ascendant descendant. So that's between them and the other. So then of course those feelings between what you believe, maybe if you're a Sag rising, like what you believe about yourself, but at the same time, like that Venus, you want to still connect with all these other people. You want to still be open to all these different types of people. But maybe the heart is on fire, like in that moment. If you flip it, reverse it, if you've got Venus on Gemini on the 1st, then it's like you are kind of that Renaissance person of relationship. But maybe in those one-on-one interactions, or maybe your partners are the spicy kind of righteous ones. It could go both ways, but that's very fun. It could be like really constructive discussion. Like, I don't want to make it out like everyone's going to get into verbal fisticuffs. It's just, again, like in the US, it's just very hard not to go there right now because everything is volatile, very, very volatile. Oh, I wish I had a dragon too. Actually, I do, unfortunately. Oh, that Venus moon opposition. Oh, Madam Drama, I'm happy to hear that. They said it's like watching a foreign film with subtitles. I know, right? It's like all of this stuff on the chart. Who knows what it all is? It could be marshmallows and candies on a desk, right? And in the ancient times, that's what they actually had. It's like my dream to force my construction father, my carpenter dad, to like make me one of these things. But they had a board, like a wooden It almost looked like a wooden game board, but it had a chart, a zodiac on it, a circle chart. And then ancient astrologers would use, and these were like the really well-off ones. And I learned all of this from Chris Brennan. So if you want to learn about these things, go learn from him. But people would use like rocks or gems or stones as the planets on the wooden board. How fucking cool is that? And if you were less well off, if you didn't have resources, they would just draw that shit in the sand, you know? So very cool. Anyway, I digress. I might come back to the cities. I just might. I'm always passing through. I somehow like I've done poll conventions and stuff. I've done a lot of polling, and I've performed in the cities. I performed at the Poorhouse once. That place was awesome. If you live in the cities, the Poorhouse is a bar with a bunch of secret doors and passageways. It's really flipping cool. It's such a fun city. I would love to go back there. So what do we got now? We got our moon in Pisces. We're coming off of that full moon in Capricorn. Let's find my notes because I lost them. Bear with me. Oh, the Mercury Cazimi. Yes, of course. So on the 15th, now we've got two definitions for a Cazimi. And the word Cazimi, now I'm going to mess this up. I'm not sure which language exactly. It's from like Arabic language. I'm being horrible right now. I feel bad. I should put it in the notes. But it comes from a word that's like Kasimi. And I'm going to put the link to where I'm finding this. I'll put my citations. But the word Cazimi, it comes from like a Latin Persian era astrology word that's also Cazimi. And it translates to the heart of the sun, or being in the heart of the sun. Another word for it, ekikardos. That is, I think, the Greek heart of the sun. And what that symbolically means is a planet at the heart of the sun. First of all, it's a loophole, because before I was talking about how a planet that's too close to the sun actually kind of gets harmed by it. It's not as easy for them. They're not as seen and heard about what they're doing. Their significations aren't as loud. This is a loophole. It's a temporary loophole where they are now not harmed by the beams of the sun. And another metaphor I've heard, it's like that planet going into the king's throne room, or if you're Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise, you're in the ready room with Jean-Luc Picard, and you are getting the king's ear. You are getting the chance to express yourself in a really seen and heard way. And so Mercury with the sun, now we're getting a very pure expression of Mercury. It's a solar expression of Mercury. So it's spirited and willful. It's that of autonomy and of authenticity. And it's like, these are my Cancer things. These are my feelings. These are my needs. This is what makes me feel growthy, protected, and safe. Or here's my plans, and or here's my ideas, and I want to share them with people in the name of growth. So these are times, like good times to journal. It's like, well, what do we do with that? That's cool. Great. Journal, do a meditate, sit with yourself and wash your mind. And maybe you'll get some good ideas too. Not that you should meditate to sit there and try to get good ideas. That is the opposite of the point. But to get some of these cool insights, to get some of these cool shower thoughts, you have to slow down a little bit. And so I always tell people during a Cazimi of any kind to just try to slow down, and so you can observe your life. Anywho, Cazimi, that's what it is. And the technical definition, Hellenistically, it's within 1 degree. So anything within 1 degree of those 59 arc minutes. And the medieval version is more, it's more strict, and it's 17 arc minutes. So if you're looking at a chart, these are the degrees. They're within 1 degree on the 15th of July. These smaller numbers are the arc minutes. And so it's like, 24 degrees, 17 minutes, 24 degrees, 16 minutes. Here they're like right. Mercury was right there. But there's like a whole, 12 hours? It's about 12 hours on the 16th that these two are within that medieval range of 17 arc minutes, where it's truly a Cazimi. So truly on July 16th, between about 8 in the morning Central Time, 9 in the morning Central Time, 9 at night, get to be journaling, say your piece, get your thoughts in order. Yeah, I have 8:47 in the morning Central Time to 7:39 p.m. Other things about this. We're having thoughts. And you know what? What I think too is because it's water, this feels like untangling heartstrings. This feels like untangling our emotional bits, much more emotionally. And yeah, just emotional. And then opposite Pluto, we're getting back to those issues of things that have power over us, things that control us, things that we don't have control over. It might not even be anything about you with Pluto, you personally. It might signify an external circumstance that you don't have any control over. That's Pluto. So whatever insights we're getting, it has a pretty clear view across the way of Pluto. And it doesn't necessarily love what's happening over there, probably. So that might flavor the insights that we get, is that they might be Plutonian. They might be the shadow things that we don't want to have to change, but we kind of know that we have to level up. That happens sometimes. Great. I just say like, I don't always, I feel like I don't always understand exactly what I've translated until I say it for like the third or fourth time. And I'm like, dang, it's like, why is it gotta be like that? All right. Oh yeah. And then another thing. So not only is that Mercury Cazimi opposite Pluto, it is also trine Neptune. So just like I had mentioned before with the full moon, that the moon hits that conjunction with Pluto and that sextile in that case with Neptune, it's something about surrender, forgiveness, spiritual understanding, spiritual growth, anything like that. That is also affecting Mercury. And this is a trine. This is very potentially constructive. So, I have a feeling whatever kind of strings we're untangling with our emotions, that one influence that's going to help with that is Neptunian. And a Neptunian influence, and people who are very critical, people who are very like Saturn, they don't like to hear this, but being nice to yourself, forgiving yourself, radical self-acceptance. Diana Rose Harper, on their website, Google Diana Rose Harper, they have a lecture on radical acceptance. It's like one of my favorite lectures. They also did an episode with the Astrology podcast where they talk about radical acceptance. But I would listen to, I would go by that lecture. That's a good one. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here. There's an acceptance of what the needs are. It's accepting, you know what, my needs aren't too much. They're just my needs. That's a good statement for this. Accepting. And two, maybe this is what I actually really want to grow or share with other people. And accepting that, because sometimes we see gifts and talents and abundance that we want to share. This is another kind of bringing in the 36 decans. This last decan of Cancer is like, here's all this abundance I have. How do I share it? Who do I want to share it with? And sometimes we have to accept what that gift actually is, to be able to share it. And we don't always want to do that. So that's another possible thing that could be going on. And the following day, we get Venus into Cancer. So no more like, maybe externally flirtatious, effervescent Venus in Gemini. Now we've got more softer, internal, concerned with the other, but not for their ideas and thoughts, because you're actually concerned about them. Cancer really cares. Neptune or Gemini's concerned with getting the info. They're concerned with the data and the facts and the words and they're into the experience that is happening. In Cancer, we're just concerned. We're just, we want to make sure that not only are my needs being met now, but how do they interact with other people's? And now if we do have abundance, now we definitely want to share it, because we've got that orientation toward the other in our place of abundance in Cancer. So this is just really warm and cozy. And I feel like it's, friends and people that you love getting together and just being comfortable with each other, which I think is really important to do. And I think as we continue to push ourselves out of our comfort zones, we can only do so much of that for so long. It is healthy to come back to your comfort place for a little bit so that you can rejuvenate, so that you can keep, edging forward, right? I think that that's that kind of push and pull between Capricorn. It's like Capricorn is going out of your comfort zone. It's kind of going out there and trying to build something that we don't know if this is going to work. Cancer, we're going to come back to home base and recharge. So don't forget to do that, especially with your loved ones on the July 18th, on July 19th. And then before you know it, July 19th, it's pretty much like a day and a half we get with both Venus and Mercury together before Mercury also jumps ship and then goes into Leo and is the first of our Leo planets this summer. So yeah, after that Cazimi, after Mercury getting all of that Cancerian knowledge through this interaction with Pluto, through this interaction with Neptune, it's almost like, okay, we got all the emotional insights, and now Venus is coming in here to kind of help us repair, help us make sense of it a little bit more, even when it comes to others, and helping us just do the aftercare. It's like, it could be a hard conversation and aftercare. It could be just that it is kind of a harrowing experience, accepting things. And so caring for yourself after that. That looks like a good thing to do. It's a journal time on the 17th. We got Venus in Cancer. This is journaling. This is making art about our feelings. It's emo. It's a little emo. It gets more emo maybe if Venus is in Scorpio, but Venus in Cancer, there's already enough emo. Poetry, especially with Mercury, that whole time that Mercury is in Cancer, that's some poetry. I didn't mention that before. It's just because if Sun and Mercury are part of our big tools of expression, what are we expressing? We're expressing our feelings. We're expressing all of that. And now Venus is here to make it artistic, make it, interesting. So that's cool. If you're an artist, we look at these things like opportunities for good creative juice, basically. On the 18th, so the one thing I wanted to look at on this day, have people watch, Jupiter is on its station degree at 8 degrees of Aries, and it is about to station retrograde. The moon being here with Jupiter, it's almost like we get a little front row seat for like a day to see what Jupiter stationing there might be about. So look to your chart, find out what house, what number here in the inner circle if you're using this software. I think most of the online things put the numbers in the middle. Find the house, find where Aries is, and see what themes of, with Jupiter, it's learning, teaching, truth, justice, knowledge, understanding. It's also expansion. It's groups of people. It is one of the ordering principles of law, and it's in this individual fiery sign. So I think we're going to be feeling a lot of that, those kind of fires in our hearts about those topics of truth and justice, but be watching with the moon on there, because Jupiter is about to start a whole story from this degree at 8 degrees of Aries. So I'm kind of curious. I don't know exactly what it's going to be about. Anytime a planet does a retrograde, when it's apparent motion in the sky, it starts to go backwards. It's the rule of re's that the astrologers talk about all the time. Redoing, rethinking. In the case of Jupiter, we're trying to re-understand. We're reconfiguring our ideas of truth, of justice. Maybe we're relearning things, reteaching things, maybe reteaching things to ourselves. All of those re's. And the only, I guess at this point, one of the main things I'm a little skeptical about with Jupiter and that retrograde story, it's going to happen all throughout fall, by the way. So Jupiter is going to station, go retrograde, station again. And that's all going to happen between, what is it? The end of this month, or the end of July. Yeah, it's the very end of July. On the 28th, Jupiter stations retrograde. And that's going to be the case until October. But my only thing that I'm really skeptical about is half-baked ideas, basically, because if Jupiter is also our enthusiasm and our optimism and its opportunity, in Aries, it's kind of like saying, Here's a shiny, brand new, get rich quick scheme that really doesn't pan out. And Aries is a quick, short energy. It doesn't have staying power. Okay. So basically, come mid-July here, when the moon is here, if you get any hints of certain ideas, just making sure they're not half-baked ones. If a friend is trying to get you to do this cool new pyramid scheme, maybe don't. Maybe don't. That's my only concern there. And on the 19th, we're going to get Mercury into Leo, like I had mentioned. And now here's a question that I see sometimes with folks is they wonder, okay, you were talking about Mercury being combust under the beams, maybe being quieter. Does that still count if they're in different houses? Does that still count if they're in different signs? And I say yes, because this is a visual thing. This is all very visual. And this is also why you'll never, like, I do see people use the outer planets using the concept of Cazimi. But I don't, because we can't see the outer planets. And so that visual component of a planet disappearing behind the sun's beams, going into the heart of the sun, all of that, it is such a tangible, visceral thing that I don't care if it's across a sign boundary. I don't care if it's across a house boundary. So yep, still under the beams. And so we might just look in a vacuum. We might see Mercury and Leo, and we might think, oh, wow, it's time for the party. Like, what is that? Yeah, July 19th. Is this when the party starts? Is this, Leo's almost here, but it's like Hermes, the messenger, is coming in, banging the drum, playing the kazoos, because the party's going to start, but it's not going to be as loud as we think, because again, Mercury's hidden. So I don't think that this is going to be the loud, expressive Leo Mercury that we're used to seeing. I think it's going to be a little more muted, and just temporarily. So then on the 21st, we see Moon moving over Mars and Rahu. So this was another thing I wanted us to watch. And this is another thing where I kind of try to use the moon to detect what certain areas of the sky are doing, or what they could be doing. I like to snoop around using the moon. And so what I mean by that is, this is July 21st, but later, and this is like July like 30th, July 31st into August 1st, August 2nd, we're going to have Mars, Uranus, and Rahu all conjunct within 3 degrees. So as July turns into August, there's quite a bit of turbulence. This is turbulence. This is very volatile and kind of shaky. On the 21st of July, what I'm curious about is Moon is here. Now, Mars is still at 11 degrees. Uranus is still at 18. So this is not quite heated up yet. This has not really gotten into its most ripe place. But the moon's here and it's kind of snooping around. It's like, imagine if like you got a pasture or field, and in that field you have a bull and a crocodile. And it's like, I don't really know if the bull and the crocodile are going to get along. I don't know what's going to happen with these two, but you see them slowly moving toward each other. They're going to hit each other at the end of the month. They're going to hit each other as this changes into August. But on the 21st, it's like Moon comes in, we come into the pasture, we see a crocodile, we see a bull, and we're like, okay, let's figure this out. What kind of mood are these animals in? That's what we're doing on the 21st. So that can maybe help us predict how that Mars Uranus thing is going to be. The moon's not going to be there at that time, but it just might help us predict. So that's how I'm handling that. So I actually wrote in my calendar on the 21st of July, I said, watch. For me, it's my 4th house. It's my private life. It's my home. It's my dwelling. So I'm watching in my 4th house for clues, for things that could portend to what's going to happen in 10 days. So for you, if it's in your career, if you are that would make you a Leo rising. If you're a Leo rising out there and you've got this in your 10th house, whatever happens at work or in your life path, on like the 21st of June. See what happens 10 days later, you know? So let's say you get like a real dick email from your boss or something on the 21st as a Leo rising. Don't respond to it right away. And if they want to schedule a meeting with you at the end of the month, wait till like August 3rd or 4th. That's what I would be doing with that time. I don't want to meet with my boss on that day. Now, I've also seen some examples in people's charts of neutral things with this, where they actually have, like, let's go with the 4th house example again, an Aquarius rising where someone's going to be moving, and that's really chaotic. And there's a lot of busyness and activity. And that makes a lot of sense for Mars, who is effort and action, and Uranus, who is well, both Mars and Uranus are instability. Before we had Uranus being unstable, it was Mars's job to be unstable. So we've got double instability. Let's add confusion with Rahu here. Let's add just excessively more for no reason. And it's just a recipe for turbulence. But now, if this is the neutral example, like you were already planning on moving your home or whatever, then that makes a lot of sense. That's nothing to worry about, because we know that that process of moving is naturally chaotic. That's how that works. So if you see something in your life and you're like, oh, actually, this is when, maybe at work, you're going to go live with a new process or something like that. Usually chaotic, usually a hot shit show, right? So we know what to expect sometimes. The other advice I have for that, and this again goes for the end of July, take like the last third of July to really take care of yourself, to be well rested, to be well fed and watered, so that when we get to like July 28th, July 29th, when all of this Mars, Uranus, Rahu stuff is really heated up in Taurus, that if there are disruptions, it'll be no big deal. We will be easily, breezily navigating the whole thing, right? And we won't be popping off because we will be well rested and we won't have low blood sugar. Like, that's the goal. So that's what I'll be doing with that. I know I got into the weeds there, but I don't know. It feels important to share that process. I like to share, like, I don't think everybody does this, and I think that's fine. I think it depends on, what the viewer wants. And I'm sure I'm boring the hell out of some people with this kind of stuff, but I do like to share my cognitive process. I like to share exactly what my brain is doing. I don't always do a good job of it, but it is my aspiration to always be sharing my thought process, so that even if it doesn't, like, maybe I'm going like too fast, maybe it's too complicated, but at least if you're a student of astrology, you can go back and like pick it apart yourself, So if I get a little repetitive, if I feel like I'm being a little too like thorough with stuff, that's why I just want to put all the game pieces directly on the table for people to see. Okay, so we're almost getting to be the end of the month. Now we've got Sun in Leo, which also puts it in a square with Mars by sign. And this is what I was talking about earlier too with the overview. A lot of this last part of the month, we still have the Sun just approaching Mars in that square. We've got Mars approaching a square with Saturn. And so you see where this is all headed. We've got a T-square situation coming about. So that's why I was kind of saying, let's be well rested. Let's be well fed and well watered when we enter into this last week of July, because I think there's just going to be a lot of conflicting things happening where we can't act in all the ways that we would like for many reasons. Like again, with Leo energy, we want to express, we want to be our best self in Leo. We want to be the best. We want to be recognized as the best. Hopefully we want at least a little bit of affirmation that we're here and we're doing the things. And I think with Mars in Taurus here, sending the Sun its energy by square, it's adding a little bit of impatience, a little bit of restlessness. It's like the Sun would like to express itself in Leo as authentically as possible, be engaged, be involved, not be on the sidelines. It's really struggling with Saturn here in opposition by sign. Our other expressive, our kind of mouthpiece is also being a bit restricted by Saturn. All the while Mars is here, like I said, sending that square energy to the sun, adding restlessness. It's like Mars wants to act, Mars wants to do, Mars wants to go. And it wants to do so based on its preferences in Taurus. Like, this is what I want, this is what I prefer, this is what I like, and this is what I value. And I would like to go get that now. I am Mars and Taurus. Sun would love to express about that, but it's not happening as fast as it would like. Mars is moving slower than it would like. And it's making Sun have to kind of wait to express itself, or have to do it in a way that's a bit stymied, which is kind of frustrating. And this whole thing speaks to a bit of frustration. There's a desire to express the self. You know, we've got, if that wasn't enough, we've got Jupiter trining the sun. I feel like I went too far. I'm going to back up. I know I'm like at the end of the month, but by sign, we've got Jupiter who's trining the sun, just adding more fuel to that fire. It does collectively between like 3 different configurations. We've got a lot of things on one side saying, go, 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 let's express ourselves, let's be authentic. And then on the other side, we got the brakes. No, you can't. Here's a bunch of reasons why. And if you can, it's going to be slow. And all the while, like, we really want to do it. And Jupiter's like, yeah, we should be able to. And I'm very optimistic about it. It's crunchy. Yeah, the pacing of things is not probably going to be what we want it to be this month. But let's back up. Let's back up. Now here's a nicer thing. I hope this is a nice couple days. So this is July 25th, July 26th. We've got the moon in Cancer. So already we've got moon in its domicile, feeling good. Venus is here and the moon is applying to Venus. And this is a condition of bonification. And a condition of bonification is a fancy way of saying that the moon is really blessed by Venus being here and very much enjoys having her presence. So on the 25th and 26th of July, if we need to do anything that is related to just anything warm, fuzzy, anything caring and considerate, anything where we can connect with the others, especially the really close, intimate others in our lives. You know, Cancer doesn't just let anyone in. Cancer it cares, but it doesn't care about like everybody. You know, Pisces cares about everybody. Like, Cancer cares about those who are in its pod, you know. So the 25th and the 26th of July seem like good days to enjoy some time with your pod of people and to be soft and take a break from sharp, pointy things in life. Yeah. That's what I'm going to say about that. I always like to find some good days too, you know, not just all the crummy ones to watch out, to be prepared. That's my Mars in Scorpio. We're always prepared. Yeah. Yeah. It's just that Jupiter sending that trine to Leo. It really, like, it wants us to be the life of the party. And Saturn is like it's not a wet blanket. It's a very dry blanket at the party. And now on the 24th, this too, we start to get Mercury away from the sun. Get this new moon. So Mercury is just getting louder and louder and louder. Like, every step of the way that Mercury gets further away from the sun, its significations become more manifest. Whatever it is expressing from Leo, it's going to be expressing more and more loudly as we enter into August. But first, let's talk about this new moon, this Leo new moon. So what's really neat about this is that condition of I just mentioned the word bonification. We pretty much have the same thing going on here. We've got the moon applying, I guess here it's a little past. Not only is the moon applying, but the sun is also applying to Jupiter. Both of them are applying to Jupiter. So the moon's next aspect here is Jupiter by trine. Or sorry, after it hits the sun. The sun's next aspect is Jupiter by trine. And so what is free flowing? You know, free flowing through the trine It's the enthusiasm. It's the boldness. It's the boisterousness. As long as it's not belligerence, it's a new moon. Those are quieter. I'm edging away from belligerent and more toward just very, very enthusiastic for the future. We're going to be intenting on things. We're going to be, with the new moon, we like to plan ahead. We've done a whole cycle. We made that bread. We made our bread. We shared how to make the bread. We shared the bread itself. And now with the Leo new moon, it's time to start that whole process over again. But what are we intenting about in Leo? Because that's a little different than our last one. This is much more, everything revolves around the sun. I know we talk a lot about Aries being self-centered, or being selfish. Honestly, Leo, y'all got to run. You giving us a run for your money with that, because literally all the planets revolve around the sun. Like, you can't make a better argument. Not that I need to encourage them. My mom is a Leo, but like, everything revolves around them. So this is kind of you oriented. It is you. It's your spirit. It's everything. It's like, if the moon is your body and your emotions, the sun is your spirit and your will. And Leo is like, and it's me and I'm doing it, and I'm going to do it in the authentic way that, I'm following what lights my heart on fire, and no less. Like, that's the vibes of Leo. It's a time to intent on those things that set your heart on fire. It's a time to plan your work so that you can work your plan. Now, unfortunately, we do have Saturn over here being our dry blanket, kind of telling us all the reasons why our plans won't work, telling us all the things we need to consider, all of the things that, it's very good at analysis. It's very good at threat and kind of cost benefit analysis in Aquarius. It's constantly thinking, as you do at the end of winter. I always talk about the potatoes in the cellar with the end of winter, but Aquarius is in the northern hemisphere, the end of winter, when we are almost out of resources. Like, so Aquarius is pretty hyper vigilant about that kind of stuff. That's not a bad thing, as long as we don't let that critical voice hold us back. So allow that critical voice to come through at the end of the month with this new moon, but don't let it totally get you down on your plans. Just say, thanks for that information, my brain. And then we can put it toward the plan and take the limitations into account, take the parameters into account. And that's the thing that Saturn's really good at, is that I think sometimes we have these big dreams, or we have these things we want to rush into or do, and we don't really understand how to do them or how to even start. And I think one of the hardest parts about starting is that we just don't know enough to set up like a plan or a framework. But that's where Saturn comes in. Personally, I like to start with the limitations, kind of. That's my style. I'm Saturnian, but I like to start, if I have something I want to accomplish, like, let's say I want to be an astrologer someday, right? How do I accomplish that plan? Well, I got to take a class maybe. And also, I'm limited in the fact that I only have so much money to pay for classes maybe. So I can only afford this type of class. Do you see what just happened there? I saw a limitation, a parameter, and we could have just said, oh, I can't afford it, guess I'm fucked. But in fact, on the contrary, by accepting what that limitation was, I can then say, okay, then what? If that's the parameter, then how do I respond to that? And what are my options? And then it actually ends up painting the picture for you, kind of. It almost writes itself. I used to do the same thing when I would make burlesque routines, when I'm trying to figure out a whole choreographed routine that's like 5 minutes long. If I just sit there and think, oh my God, how am I going to choreograph anything? How am I going to all of a sudden come up with 5 minutes of movement that's coherent and makes sense? What I do is I start with my parameters. I need to take off 3 articles of clothing. What are those articles of clothing? And at what points in the music do I want to take those clothes off? Those are now my limitations. The rest of the dance writes itself around those little parameters that I have to stick to. So I hope those examples kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, that I think this is going to be kind of discouraging Not to mention that, like, as soon as Mercury gets out of the beams, it's running straight into a Saturn wall. It feels very discouraging to me. But I just encourage us to not get totally discouraged. Saturn speaks to delays. Saturn speaks to things having to maybe be reconsidered or rebuilt in Aquarius. So that might be what happens. It doesn't mean that your idea is wrong. It doesn't mean that your intention is not the right one. And what am I talking about here? I just wanted to show you this. This was kind of my big womp womp for the for the month of July. We've got this, like, what could have been such an inspiring new moon. And it's like Mercury comes out of the gate like, look at what we planned. Let's do it. And then it just gets hit with a no. It just gets hit with a, yeah, but here's these other things you got to do, or you have to proceed in this correct way. So moon is going to be there to feel all of it. Yeah, try not to get too disenchanted. But I think there's going to be some hard realities here to handle at the end of the month. Oh yeah, I skipped over the Mercury-Mars square as well. That's something to consider too. We've got this very expressive pair with Leo being the filter that the Sun and the Mercury are working through right now. And we can see that we've got this very volatile energy and this very expressive energy. And I think you can do the math on that. In your pursuit of expressing yourself in your most authentic way, don't be influenced too much by Mars. Don't be influenced too much by Uranus. This, I think, at best could speak to an unexpected opportunity to express the self, an unexpected opportunity to act in a way that behooves the ideas, that behooves what you actually want. But it's not stable. It's not stable. And there, anytime Mars is involved, there's a risk of separation or loss. That's just how that works. So just make sure whatever battles you're getting into, just choose them wisely. That's a theme for the month, I think. That's just a theme for life. Choose your battles wisely. Yeah, and then the 27th, Mars is within striking range. So this is that end of month stuff that we were trying to snoop around when the moon was in Taurus on the 21st. Whenever planets get within 3 degrees, that's when things really start to heat up. And so this is already on the 27th. There's not as much light in the moon. When the moon isn't as full of light, I feel like society just is not as busy. So that's something. But as we can see, the moon enters into expressive Leo while all of this is squared. So that's going to be some pretty prickly energy, I think, and pretty frustrated coming from Taurus. This has been pent up now for several weeks. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Definitely sleep on the email kind of weather. Yeah, and this too. Don't be the pedant at the end of the month. So this, I guess, a couple little more notes on this. So this new moon, we're also getting that Jupiter trine. That's very, very nice. I really, really love that. It feels very expansive. It's like, as much as we might have some frustration waiting for things to grow, Jupiter in Aries sending this trine is like a little bit of miracle grow. It's a little bit of opportunity, a little bit of abundance. So if you do have any opportunities coming in on the 28th as well, that could be a thing. That could be a thing. Opportunities particularly coming from the Aries part of your chart. So if you are a Libra rising and you've got Aries in your 7th, it could be opportunities coming from partners or partnerships, just as an example. Yeah, and I think the last thing to talk about is just that Mercury emerging from the beams. So there we can see we've got 15 degrees between Sun and Mercury. Again, it's not exactly, on 15. That's the textbook convention. It could be anywhere a couple degrees before or after that, depending on your location, where we'll be able to see Mercury again. And just as Mercury gets visible, it's got its megaphone, it's ready to say a thing. Again, it runs into a head-on collision with Saturn, saying, here's the limits, here's the stupid, institutional, maybe bureaucratic things you got to deal with. Less so in Aquarius, but it's still Saturn ruled. It's still a system situation. And more personally, more individually, if you want to look in your own chart, see where Aquarius is, that's where the limitations might be coming from. So for instance, me as an Aquarius rising, I might be the limitation. I might be impeding myself, or the things that are happening with me and my Saturn and my first, those things are kind of the limiting factor. They're the bottleneck. They're what needs to be kind of dealt with first before advancing whatever these intentions are. So definitely not like the smoothest, but it can't always be that way. Yeah, I said I was pre-annoyed. I was already annoyed about it. And then finally, so Uranus, Rahu at the same degree. And so if Uranus is disruption, instability, interruptions, it is also innovation, ingenuity. Like I had mentioned, happy accidents, doing things differently. That's a lot of instability. Rahu, increase, confusion. Mars, urgency, restlessness, action. So if you have a sense of urgency on something, if you feel like you have to act on it right now, make sure that you actually do. Or if it's not just that you're trying to remedy or make your internal restlessness go away. So if you're feeling restless and you feel like the solution is to act on it, it might be, but I would invite you to explore if that's really true or if it can really actually wait until like August 3rd. Okay, that's your date. So it's not like you have to wait super long. But if it were me on July 30th, I mean, I'm going to try to sit this one out. You can't really sit this one out with astrology. It will find you. But I'm not going to be like calling my parents and getting into arguments with them on this day. That's not what I'm going to be doing with that energy. It's one of the more interesting signatures of the year, I think. I really feel like it is. So I'm the astrologer part of me is really excited to see what this is going to be. It is one of the more unstable Tauruses we're probably going to experience in our lifetime. Because if you think about it, Uranus isn't going to come back around here for a long time. Rahu isn't going to be back around here for another, 18 years or something. So the chance of Mars, Uranus, and Rahu being all here, all at the same time, it really does not happen that often. And all the more reason to like pay attention to it, just for no other reason than historical purposes for posterity, as our little empirical scientist hearts desire. Okay, I'm going to check the chat, but does anyone have any final questions, any final things you wish we would have gone over that I didn't cover? I know we've been at this for a while. I know people's attention spans are usually no more than 90 minutes. Hey, Mercurius. Hey. All right. Well, it doesn't look like anyone is having any loose ends they need to tie up. So some announcements. I do this every month. It's not at the same time every month because I've been electing these with astrology to try to pick the most whatever times. I really have been considering doing them consistently. We'll see. But keep your eye out on my IG. I will also, put it up much in advance up on YouTube as a scheduled thing. So you'll be able to see exactly when it is. But just so you know, it's not at the same time every month. I also do a live IG thing once every 2 weeks. So it's the first and third Tuesday of every month over on my Instagram account, which is also Aligning Light Astrology. I do IG live office hours. And basically during that hour, it's straight up answering questions. There's no ability for me to share my my circle chart. So it's just me spouting off about whatever I want to in the moment. Usually astrological. Sometimes it's not. But if you want to join me, ask questions, then that's a really good opportunity. It is also free 99, doesn't cost a cent. If you want to work with me individually, I do tutoring. If finances are an issue, I do have a sliding scale. On my website, I don't think the sliding scale is in regards to tutoring, but just email me. It works for that too. Consults, I'm wide open pretty much all the time. I'm usually only booked out like a week or two in advance, so you can get in pretty darn quick with me if you want a birth chart reading, if you want forecasting. I don't technically offer elections, but I can do them. So if you need one, you can email me. I should put it up as an offering. Other than that, I really don't think I have anything really going on. That's pretty much it. I'm just living the dream, being a consulting astrologer. But just remember, I don't want money to get in the way of this. I feel like this is a service that really could benefit pretty much everybody. And I don't want money to get in the way of that. So if you want to work with me and you see the prices and you're just like, oh my God, no, email me. My email is aligninglightastro, ASTRO. It's shortened, aligninglightastro@gmail.com. And I'll just, we'll just work it out there. I think that's it. Everybody be safe. Everybody be peaceful and well as much as you can these days. And just, sleep on the emails. Sleep on the emails, be safe. I think that's it. All right.